This is the story of a slow, agonizing public fracture. What looked like a triumphant return to the spotlight was actually a devastating metaphor for a man entirely out of his depth and a personal brand in terminal decline. In less than 4 years, the ultimate modern fairy tale has metastasized into a chilling display of commercial desperation. Every staged photograph, every forced smile, and every calculated social media drop now tells a story not of a couple finding their freedom, but of two people trapped in a psychological prison of their own making. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly what is happening behind the high security gates of Montecito. We're going to unpack the subtle physical signals that expose a marriage fundamentally at war with its own ambitions. We will examine why the American elite have initiated a brutal, silent freeze-out against the couple and what a few specific, heavily curated public moments reveal about a prince who has slowly realized he traded a 1,000-year-old empire for a hollow Hollywood aesthetic. This is not about tabloid rumors. This is a forensic look at the collapse of an illusion. To understand the sheer scale of this tragedy, you have to remember the man before the collapse. Prince Harry was not just a working royal, he was the emotional core of the modern monarchy. He possessed an untouchable, effortless charisma. He enjoyed a level of immense privilege, staggering wealth, and bulletproof global goodwill that billionaires spend lifetimes trying to buy and inevitably fail. He was the beloved rogue, a respected military veteran, a man whose relevance was guaranteed by birthright. He did not need to hustle. He did not need to pitch himself to streaming executives or sell his personal trauma for relevance. His power was inherent. The audience cared about him simply because he existed. That is what makes the current reality so jarring. The contrast is a masterclass in the devastating nature of Schadenfreude. We are watching a man who once stood shoulder to shoulder with world leaders on the balcony of Buckingham Palace, now reduced to standing awkwardly in the background of Instagram stories. While his wife attempts to peddle artisanal fruit preserves to indifferent reality television stars, the golden era is dead, replaced by a grueling daily grind for clicks, relevance, and commercial viability. The narrative the public was originally sold was one of survival and peace. It was framed as a desperate flight across the ocean to protect a young family from the vicious, unyielding glare of the British press, and for a brief moment, the world believed it. The world empathized, but the story rapidly changed. It did not change because the press relentlessly pursued them. It changed because they absolutely refused to let the press ignore them. Months turned into years, and the quiet, secluded life in the California hills was replaced by a staggering exploitation of their own history. First came the explosive Oprah interview, then the 6-part Netflix reality series, followed by a deeply invasive memoir. They demanded strict privacy while simultaneously selling every intimate, painful detail of their familial estrangement to the highest bidder. This was the first exposure of a fatal moral contradiction. You cannot weaponize your victimhood for multi-million-dollar contracts, and then act shocked when the public begins to question your authenticity. But the true story is not found in what they say to friendly talk show hosts or in polished press releases. The true story is written in their body language, in the subtle, devastating social media signals, and in the visual humiliation of their recent public appearances. Look closely at the highly orchestrated pseudo-royal tours to places like Nigeria or Colombia. These trips are designed to mimic the optics of official state visits, complete with motorcades and receiving lines, but they carry absolutely no diplomatic weight. They are an illusion of power. During these appearances, Meghan is consistently in her element. She finds the camera lens with the precision of a heat-seeking missile directing the narrative, commanding the frame and confidently stepping in front of the microphone. But look at Harry. That detail matters. Harry's eyes tell a story of profound, crushing isolation. Notice the rigid posture, the forced, vacant smiles that vanish the second he thinks the camera is off. The untouched glass at a VIP table, the way he often trails a few steps behind his wife, looking less like a commanding duke and more like a bewildered captive fulfilling a contractual obligation. What looks like a small public moment of him politely stepping aside is actually a massive psychological tell. It is the visual representation of a man who has entirely lost his identity. This internal tension is inextricably linked to the brutal reality of their current social standing. The commercial desperation has not gone unnoticed by the gatekeepers of American high society. The illusion of power only lasts as long as people are afraid to cross you, or as long as they need you. The Sussexes currently possess neither leverage nor invincibility. They have burnt the bridges to the most powerful institution on earth. They have weaponized their grievances to the point of absolute public exhaustion. And Hollywood, a town built on cold transactional value, has run the numbers. Associating with them is no longer a status symbol, it is a brand risk. We see this freeze out not in loud condemnations, but in the devastating empty spaces. The elite A-list parties they are not invited to. The Met Gala red carpets they never walk. The subtle, polite distance maintained by billionaires and power brokers who once clamoured for their attention. A jar of jam sent to a celebrity influencer that goes entirely unacknowledged on social media is not just a failed marketing tactic. It is a visual humiliation. It is the Hollywood ecosystem sending a clear, undeniable signal you are no longer part of the inner circle. This brings us to the most devastating ethical rupture of all, and the undeniable epicenter of their silent marital fracture, the children. For Prince Harry, the defining trauma of his life was the relentless, suffocating public scrutiny he endured as a child. His foundational promise as a father, the very justification he gave for tearing his family away from the monarchy, was to shield Archie and Lilibet from that exact same fate. He wanted them to grow up in the mud in the trees, fiercely protected and entirely away from the cameras. He wanted a normal life for them. Yet as the Sussex commercial empire began to stall as the Spotify deals collapsed, and the Hollywood elite turned their backs, the strategy suddenly shifted. The children, the very entities meant to be protected at all costs, were quietly transitioned into brand assets. A child's birthday is no longer just a private family milestone. It is strategically leveraged as an opportunity for a lifestyle brand product launch. A casual family photo is no longer just a memory. It is a calculated PR drop, explicitly timed to hijack headlines from the working royal family across the Atlantic. This is not just a PR disaster, it is a complete ethical collapse. It exposes a massive internal divide between a man who genuinely fears the media and a woman whose commercial survival depends entirely on courting it. Harry is watching the exact cycle he fled being recreated under his own roof, orchestrated by his own team. He is realizing that the freedom he was promised comes with a suffocating, deeply uncomfortable price tag. As the walls of their Montecito estate seem to close and the psychological toll is becoming impossible to hide, he is a man without a country, severed from his lifelong friends, and increasingly without a purpose that does not involve monetizing his own grief. The royal institution he spent years trying to dismantle is moving on without him projecting a unified, dignified front while he is left to navigate the murky, unforgiving waters of influencer marketing. But the true breaking point has not even been reached, because just as the public begins to fully see the cracks in the Montecito facade, a new, entirely unprecedented move from the palace is about to force Harry into an impossible corner. A subtle, ruthless signal sent from thousands of miles away that changes the reading of everything, leaving him to face the devastating reality of exactly what he has signed away. The true retaliation of the British monarchy was not an angry public rebuttal, it was absolute deafening indifference. For years, the Sussexes operated under the assumption that the palace needed their star power just as much as they needed the Royal Association. But the unprecedented move from the palace was not a loud declaration of war. It was a digital and visual erasure. The quiet demotion of the couple on the official royal website, placing them beneath working members of the family the global public barely recognizes, was not a simple administrative update. It was a strategic amputation. What looked like a small public moment was actually a devastating metaphor for their new reality. The palace was explicitly stating that the Sussex brand is entirely unauthorized. This silent maneuver effectively severed the commercial lifeline that the couple had been dangling over the heads of streaming giants and publishing houses. The royal magic they were implicitly selling is gone, replaced by a cold, bureaucratic reality. And this is where the psychological toll on Prince Harry becomes impossible to ignore. He traded the stoic, stiff upper lip of his upbringing for the Californian vernacular of healing and generational trauma. But this therapy speak was weaponized to launch devastating, highly lucrative public attacks on his father and brother. The tragic psychological truth here is profound. In his desperate attempt to cure his historical isolation, he engineered a permanent, insurmountable estrangement from the only people on earth who truly understood the unique burden of his birth. Prince William did not retaliate with a tell-all interview or an explosive memoir. He built a fortress of absolute silence. He moved on presenting an image of unwavering stability, dedicating himself to his duties and his family. That silence is the one weapon Prince Harry has absolutely no defense against. It starves the Sussex PR machine of the oxygen it so desperately needs to survive. There is no longer a transatlantic dialogue. There is only a monologue echoing in an increasingly empty room. And that is where the story changes, revealing a massive internal divide. Notice the subtle shifts in their recent public endeavours that carry devastating, deeper meaning. For years, their brand was presented as an indivisible, unified powerhouse. Now we are witnessing a quiet, professional uncoupling. Meghan is pivoting back to the commercial safety of a domestic lifestyle brand, attempting to cultivate an aesthetic of effortless California wealth through fruit preserves and cookware. She is returning to the exact influencer roots she cultivated long before her marriage. Meanwhile, Harry is retreating into the familiar, safe comfort of the sporting world and veteran charities, filming documentaries about polo. This professional separation is not a natural, healthy evolution of their business empire. It is a frantic pivot born of commercial desperation. It suggests a deeply uncomfortable internal realization that their combined identity, which was built almost entirely on royal grievance and systemic victimhood, is commercially exhausted. The public has fatigue. By splitting their professional paths, they are attempting to stop the bleeding, but it also signals that the joint venture of their life is failing to yield the massive returns they were promised. The public interpretation, relentlessly pushed by their aggressive PR machine, is one of thriving, unbothered independence. We are constantly fed a narrative that they are living their best lives, deeply in love and operating on a higher moral plane. But the private uncertainty bleeds through the carefully curated facade. You see it in the aggressive rapid-fire rebranding efforts. You see it in the obsessive need to clap back at minor tabloid criticisms through anonymous sources. You see it in the way every family milestone, every birthday, and every holiday is somehow leveraged to secure a positive headline. Truly powerful people do not need to constantly remind the world of their power. Content. Secure families do not need to prove their happiness through exclusive magazine spreads, time to upstage their estranged relatives. This is why this story resonates so deeply far beyond the narrow lanes of royal gossip. It is not just about a prince and an actress, it is a modern Greek tragedy about the illusion of control. It exposes the fatal flaw of believing that global adoration can be manufactured in a boardroom, or that a 1,000-year-old institution can be bullied into submission by a carefully timed podcast. It is a story about the ultimate betrayal of family loyalty for commercial gain, only to discover that the commercial world is ruthlessly unsentimental. When the audience stops clicking, the empathy vanishes. We are watching the twilight of an illusion. The bridges are definitively burnt. The royal safety net has been meticulously and publicly dismantled by their own hands. They are now entirely reliant on a Hollywood ecosystem that views them not as royalty, but as content creators who are struggling to generate engaging content. What remains is a fractured foundation, a marriage carrying the unbearable, crushing weight of a failing commercial empire, and a prince who must eventually look in the mirror and ask himself what he truly gained in the exchange. The golden era is over. The reality of paying the bills, maintaining the security, and feeding the insatiable beast of public relevance has arrived. Whether they can survive this silent marital fracture and the Hollywood freeze-out remains to be seen. But one thing is absolutely certain: there is no way back. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the truth behind the headlines. If you appreciate analysis that cuts through the noise and respects your intelligence, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and we will see you in the next video.